The shelter had no name for the first 8 months, which was not an oversight. Nathan Reyes had built it with his hands and his tools and the money he had saved by not spending it on anything else, and he had built it on the back acre of a property outside Mora, New Mexico, that had once been his grandmother's and was now his, and he had not named it because naming it would have made it a destination, and he had not yet decided whether he was building a destination or simply doing the next thing that needed doing. He had been doing the next thing that needed doing for 4 years, which was the length of time since his daughter Sophia had died, and the next thing was a reliable organizational system that kept him from having to stop and decide what to do with himself, because stopping and deciding was where the problem lived. He built the shelter because there were too many strays in the high desert hills outside Mora and not enough places for them to go, and because building things with his hands was the only activity that engaged enough of his brain to quiet the rest of it. That was the full extent of the plan when he started. If this story finds you tonight, tell us in the comments which city you are watching from, and subscribe before we go further, because what arrived at that unnamed shelter on a cold April morning was not something Nathan had built a plan to receive, and it changed everything about what the plan turned out to be. Nathan Reyes was 52 years old and looked like a man who had been made from the landscape he lived in, compact and weathered and darker complected than he had been before the sun got to him, with black hair cut short in a gray that had spread through it faster than it should have over the past 4 years, and dark eyes that were attentive and careful in the manner of men who have spent years reading environments for information that other people missed. He had been a Navy SEAL for 18 years and had left the service voluntarily at 45, not from injury or burnout but from a specific calculation. Sophia had been 8 when he retired, and he had already missed too much of her life to the demands of a career she had never once complained about, and she deserved a father who was in the building more than the fraction he had managed to be. He had moved the family to New Mexico, his grandmother's land, and had spent 3 years being present in the way he had planned to be. The school pickups and the weekend hikes on the mesa and the evenings helping with homework at the kitchen table, and he had been good at it, better than he had expected, and Sophia had been the kind of child who made it easy to be present because she was completely worth being present for. A serious, funny, endlessly curious girl with her mother's eyes and his grandmother's way of knowing what mattered. She had kept a journal from the time she was 8, writing in it every night in a handwriting that started small and uncertain and grew steadier over the years. And Nathan had not opened it since the funeral because he was not ready, and he had placed it on the shelf in her room next to the photograph of the two of them at the top of Jicarita Peak, the summer she was 10, when she had insisted on hiking the full trail despite the elevation and had made it, and had looked at the view for a long time without saying anything, before finally saying that she understood why his grandmother had stayed. Sophia had been 11 when the diagnosis arrived, a brain tumor, pediatric glioblastoma, and the word prognosis in the oncologist's office had the particular weight of a word that has been chosen carefully, because the alternative words are too direct for a room containing parents. She had lived 14 months after the diagnosis, and Nathan and his wife Carmen had arranged their entire world around those 14 months in a way that people do when they understand that time has become something different than it was before. They had been good months, in the way that certain terrible things contain within them a quality of presence that ordinary life rarely achieves, and Sophia had been herself through almost all of them, curious and funny and occasionally impatient with the restrictions her condition required, and then she had not been herself, and then she had been gone, and the world had continued in the specific, incomprehensible way that it always does, and Nathan had not yet found a description for what came after that seemed adequate to what it actually was. Carmen had gone to stay with her sister in Albuquerque for 3 months after the funeral, which was something she needed, and Nathan had understood and supported, and when she came back, they had spent a year being 2 people in a house where everything pointed towards someone who was no longer there, and they had tried, and they were still trying, and some days the trying felt like enough, and some days it felt like the kind of effort that reminded you of what you were putting the effort in for and what was no longer there to receive it. They were still married. They still loved each other, in the way that 2 people who have been through the largest possible thing together love each other. which is a way that has more respect and steadiness in it than most other varieties, but sometimes less lightness. Carmen worked as a nurse in Mora and kept a garden and had a quality of practical forward motion that Nathan respected enormously and could not always match. Nathan built the shelter. And before the shelter, he had built a barn addition. And before that, he had refinished all the floors in the house. And before that, he had replaced every fence post on the property. And Carmen did not comment on this pattern except once, when she said quietly that she hoped he would find something to build toward as well as something to build, and he had understood exactly what she meant and had not yet managed to do it. The shelter was a serious structure, because Nathan did not build things that were not serious. 3 connected enclosures with proper insulation, a covered outdoor run, a small medical evaluation room with a sink and a supply cabinet, a separate quarantine space, and a storage room with a second-hand chest freezer for food. He had done most of the electrical himself and had brought in a licensed contractor for the parts that required inspection. And the whole thing had taken 4 months of weekends and 3 weeks of full days, and when it was finished he stood in the yard and looked at it for a long time without saying anything to anyone. Carmen looked at it too, and she said it was good work, which was true and was also less than what she meant, and he knew that, and she knew he knew it. The first animals came from the county animal control officer, a straightforward young man named Deputy Rios, who had been informally routing overflow animals to various property owners in the area for years, and was relieved to have a location with actual infrastructure. 2 adult mixed breeds, a shepherd cross, and something with hound in it, both male, both intact, both needing neutering before they could go anywhere. A 3-legged cat who arrived in a carrier and surveyed the medical room with the critical assessment of a contractor reviewing someone else's renovation. 2 puppies of uncertain parentage who were easy to place and were placed within a month through a network of contacts Deputy Rios maintained. Nathan fed them and cleaned after them and documented their health and temperament in a logbook he kept on the supply room shelf. Because documentation was a system, and systems were what he had instead of a plan, and he was good at systems. The miracle, which is a word Nathan would not have used and Carmen used exactly once and then put away, arrived on a Thursday morning in April, in the form of a dog Nathan did not expect and could not have prepared for. She was a 4-year-old Australian shepherd, tricolor, blue merle with 1 blue eye and 1 brown, with the particular intensity of expression that Australians carry and the specific quality of waiting that dogs have when they are looking for someone specific and have not yet confirmed whether the person in front of them is that person. She had been picked up near the highway 12 miles east of Mora. No collar, no chip, thin but not critical, with a temperament evaluation from Deputy Rios that said highly intelligent, highly social, needs assessment. Nathan opened her kennel run and she walked in and sat down and looked at him. He did not know why this stopped him the way it did. He had handled dozens of dogs by now, had learned to read their communications with the attention he had once given to other kinds of environmental information, and a paw on an arm was not unusual. What was unusual was that Sophia had had an Australian shepherd, a tricolor, blue merle, 1 blue eye, and 1 brown, named Compass, that she had received for her 9th birthday and had loved with the complete, uncomplicated devotion that children give to dogs before they learn to protect themselves from loving things too much. Compass had disappeared from the property 14 months after Sophia's death, slipping through a gap in a fence that Nathan had not yet repaired because he had been in the middle of something else. And they had searched and posted and called, and he had not been found, and Nathan had added this to the private list of things he had failed to prevent, which was a list he kept with the same precision he kept everything else. He did not believe this was Compass. Compass would have been 6, and this dog was listed as 4, and the highway was 12 miles away, and the world was full of blue merle Australians with mismatched eyes. He told himself this while he checked her over, while he photographed her for the intake record, while he ran the scanner over her neck and shoulders twice, because the first pass gave a reading he did not trust, and the second pass confirmed it. The chip number matched a registration in a national database, and the name on the registration was Compass Reyes, and the address was his grandmother's land outside Mora, New Mexico, and the registered owner was Sophia Reyes, age 9, deceased. He sat on the floor of the medical room for a period of time he did not measure, with the dog pressed against his side and his hand on her back, and said nothing out loud. Because there was nothing out loud to say. And Compass, if she was Compass, had the decency of a dog that has come a long way and is willing to wait for the person she has found to finish whatever they need to finish. Carmen came out from the house at some point because she had seen Nathan go into the shelter and not come back. And she stood in the doorway of the medical room and looked at the two of them and sat down on the floor herself. And that was the afternoon that something changed in the house, not completely, not all at once, but in the specific way that a room changes when a window is opened after a long time closed. Not a transformation, just air, just the slow return of something that had been absent long enough to be missed. Compass stayed. This was not a decision so much as a recognition that the decision had already been made by forces operating on a longer timeline than Nathan's planning. He finished the fence repairs that had been on the list for 2 years. He named the shelter Sophia's Place, not on a sign at first, but in the intake logbook where he recorded every animal, and then on a sign, because Carmen asked him to make one, and he made it well. The letters clean and even. The wood from the same stand of piñon that his grandmother had always used for the things that needed to last. Deputy Rios told 2 other animal control officers in adjacent counties, and the intake increased, and Nathan hired a part-time assistant, a retired schoolteacher named Gloria Sandoval, who had been looking for something to do with her mornings and turned out to have a quality with frightened animals that Nathan recognized as the same quality his grandmother had had, a patience that didn't need anything back. Carmen began spending Saturday mornings at the shelter, not to help with the animals specifically, but because it was the place on the Sophia's Place placed 47 animals in its first full year of operation, which was not a large number by the standards of established shelters, but was 47 animals that had somewhere to go that they had not had before. And each one was documented in the logbook in Nathan's precise, careful handwriting, with a name, a date, a brief physical description, and the name of the person or family who had taken them home. He had not planned the logbook to be anything beyond an operational record. It became, without his designing it, a book of small, continuing stories, 47 of them in the first year, each one beginning with a highway or a ditch or a county holding pen, and ending with a name and an address and a life that had somewhere to be. He read it sometimes in the evenings, not from sentiment, but from the same habit of debriefing that had followed him out of operational life, and on the evenings he read it he slept more easily than on the evenings he did not. On the first anniversary of its naming, Carmen brought flowers from the garden and put them on the shelf in the supply room next to the logbook, yellow ones that Sophia had always grown along the fence line. And Nathan looked at them and did not say anything, and that was also enough, because some things do not need to be said to be fully received. There are things that cannot be built back, and Nathan Reyes knew this better than most people know anything. What he had learned over 4 years of building the next thing and then the next was that building towards someone is not the same as building for them, and that Sophia's Place was both, and that both was permitted, and that the dog sitting on the floor of a medical room with her paw on his arm had traveled 12 miles, or 2 years, or the distance between one kind of grief and another, to tell him so. If this story found you tonight, share it with someone who is in the middle of building the next thing and hasn't yet seen what it's building toward. Tell us in the comments which moment moved you most and which city you are watching from. And if you can, support a small animal rescue near you, the ones with no signs yet, and logbooks on supply room shelves. Subscribe to this channel and we will keep finding these